It all started with a letter taped to my front door. Plain white envelope. HOA logo stamped right on the front. I'd been through enough neighborhood nonsense to know that meant trouble. Sure enough, when I unfolded the paper, the words "unauthorized boat storage" practically leapt off the page. My boat, the same one that had been tied up at the dock for the past 6 years without a single complaint, was now, according to the HOA, a visual disruption to community standards. They gave me 2 weeks to remove it or face daily fines. My first thought? You gotta be kidding me. But I knew exactly what this was really about. The new HOA president, Mark Delaney, had been itching to make an example out of someone since he got voted in last spring. I guess that someone was me. Here's the part that makes this story worth hearing. That little lake the HOA was trying to regulate, it wasn't actually theirs. It wasn't part of the common area. It wasn't covered by their bylaws. That lake was mine. My dad bought it 20 years ago when he picked up the land our house sits on. And that boat dock, private property, paid for in full before most of these people even lived here. So I didn't take the letter to heart. But I did start documenting everything. Because something told me this was about to turn into a lot more than just a boat dispute. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if your HOA ever pulled something like this. I figured the first step was just to have a conversation. No drama, no threats, just a calm talk to clear things up. So I showed up at the next HOA meeting with a copy of my deed in hand and a simple plan. Explain the lake wasn't under their jurisdiction, remind them it's private property, and be done with it. But the second I brought it up, Mark Delaney smirked like he'd been waiting for the chance to flex his authority. While you may believe the lake is private, he said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, the board has reviewed community access points and determined it falls under shared usage guidelines. I blinked. Shared usage? What guidelines? The lake had no public entry. The only dock was mine, and any access trail had long since overgrown. But Mark didn't care. He pointed to a vague clause in the handbook about community recreational areas and claimed the lake now qualified retroactively. That's when I realized something wasn't right. This wasn't just about the boat. The HOA had bigger plans, and my lake was part of it. The next morning, I woke up to something even more surreal. A flyer stuck in my mailbox. Summer Fishing Kickoff, hosted by the Lakeside HOA. There was a little map printed underneath. They had drawn a dotted line straight through my dock, labeling it Community Fishing Spot. My name wasn't mentioned once. No request. No permission. Just an announcement like they owned the place. And just like that, it wasn't just a policy issue anymore. It was a trespassing problem. And I don't take that lightly. That weekend, I waited. I knew someone from the HOA would show up eventually, either to inspect the dock or, worse, start setting up for their little fishing event. Sure enough, Saturday afternoon, a man in khakis and a clipboard wandered down the hill behind my property like he belonged there. He didn't knock, didn't announce himself, just strolled right up to the water like it was a public park. I stepped outside and called out, "You lost?" He looked up, surprised to see me, and said, "Oh, just checking the shoreline for the HOA event next week. You the homeowner?" I didn't answer that. I just walked down the path, handed him a laminated copy of my deed, and pointed to the parcel number that included the entire lake. This water, this dock, that hill you just walked down, all mine. You and your event? Not invited. He looked rattled for a second, but then got that smug, HOA trained calm. "You want to take that up with the board," he said, already backing up like I'd drawn a weapon. "I'm just here to prep the site." "Then prep yourself a new job." I shot back, because the next person I catch trespassing is getting served papers, or worse, police. He didn't argue. He just nodded, mumbled something about miscommunication, and left. But I knew better. This wasn't miscommunication. This was coordinated. They were testing how far they could go before I pushed back. So I pushed. That night, I put up signs around the lake. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. I even installed a few trail cams for good measure. If they wanted a battle, fine. They'd get one. But I wasn't fighting for a boat anymore. I was fighting for what was mine. 3 days later, I came home from work and saw them. 5 folding chairs set along the shoreline, tackle boxes open, beer cans half buried in the mud. They'd done it. The HOA fishing club had kicked off their event early on my lake, and not a single person had asked for permission. No calls, no knocks, nothing, just a pack of retirees from 2 streets over, casting lines like this was a campground and not the private sanctuary my family built. I parked the truck, walked down the water, and counted each face. Every single one of them was on the HOA email chain, which meant they'd seen my response, read my documents, and showed up anyway. One of them, Doug, a guy I'd barely spoken to beyond a few lawn compliments, actually had the nerve to wave. "You're welcome to join," he said with a grin, like he was doing me a favor. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just walked over, snapped a few photos of their gear, their faces, the beer, the trash, every single thing I'd warned them not to do. Then I said, "Hope you're all good at explaining yourselves. Trespassing, littering, property damage. I've got all on camera. This lake isn't community property. It's mine, and you're done here." Doug stood up, trying to puff himself up. We were told it was okay. Michelle said the HOA approved it. If you've got a problem, take it up with her. I smiled. Cold. Tight. "Oh, I will." They left not long after. But what they didn't know was I wasn't just going to talk to Michelle. I was heading to the county recorder's office first thing in the morning, because if the HOA thought they could rewrite the rules, I was about to rewrite the battlefield. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying Doug's words in my head. Michelle said it was approved. But approved by who? Not the county, not the state, and sure as hell not me. So the next morning, I headed to the county recorder's office with a folder full of property documents and questions I already knew the answers to. The clerk, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes and a caffeine addiction, took one look at my parcel number and nodded. "Yup," she said, flipping through the file. That entire body of water, including the dock, shoreline, and the access path, it's all part of Lot 27, privately owned, transferred to you 6 years ago, and there's nothing on record giving the HOA any claim over it. I asked, already knowing the answer. She snorted. Only thing the HOA filed about this lake was a rejected proposal back in 2009. Tried to get it reclassified as a shared green space. Got shot down. Hard. My heart pounded. There it was. The HOA had tried to take the lake once before and failed. But now, under Michelle's leadership, they were pretending the issue never existed. I thanked the clerk, took copies of the old rejection documents, and headed straight to my lawyer's office. He barely finished reading the paperwork before shaking his head. They're bluffing. Hard. What they're doing now. It's not just wrong, it's illegal. You got grounds for civil action, trespassing charges, and possibly even fraud if that flyer came from the board. That's when I decided to hit back. Not just with cease and desist notices, but with something stronger. A letter was sent to Michelle Gray, certified mail, formal, direct. It stated in no uncertain terms that the HOA was unlawfully using private property and that any future trespassers would be reported to law enforcement. And just to make things crystal clear, I included a copy of the old rejected reclassification request, the one with her name on it. Game on. I figured once Michelle got that letter, she'd back down, maybe grumble, maybe posture, but ultimately fold. I underestimated her. Big time. 2 days later, I started noticing a shift. My mailbox was left open. My trash bins knocked over. A dead fish of all things, tossed on my dock with its mouth gaping toward my house like some weird message. I wanted to believe it was coincidence, just random acts. But I'd lived here long enough to know the rhythm of the place, and this wasn't random. Then came the whispers. At the hardware store, someone made a loud joke behind my back about Mr. Lake Sheriff patrolling the shoreline. A woman I used to wave to every morning turned her head when I drove by, and when I stopped by the local cafe, the same one I'd gone to for years, the regulars quieted down the second I walked in. Michelle wasn't backing down. She was digging in, weaponizing gossip, spinning her story faster than I could chase it. The flyer I'd pulled from my mailbox? she distributed a newer one. This time it claimed the lake was traditionally used by the community and accused me by name of trying to shut down family-friendly events out of spite. I found it taped to the community board at the post office, right next to a sign-up sheet for a neighborhood unity barbecue hosted on my dock. That's when I knew this wasn't just about the lake anymore. Michelle was turning me into the villain, the reclusive guy hoarding nature and ruining the spirit of the neighborhood. So I did something I hadn't planned. I invited the sheriff to my property, walked him down to the water, showed him the posted signs, the paperwork, the footprint trails from recent trespassers. Then I asked one question. When they show up for that barbecue, can I have them removed? He nodded. If they step 1 foot on this dock, I'll do it myself. That gave me just enough air to breathe. But deep down, I knew Michelle wasn't done yet. By now, I knew this wouldn't end with a polite letter or a couple of warning signs. Michelle was too deep in it, too proud, too used to getting her way. But what she didn't count on was this. I wasn't just some loner with a dock and a short fuse. I had history on my side, and leverage. That weekend, I called up an old friend of my dad's, a guy named Alonzo, who used to help maintain the property back when my father was still alive. Alonzo wasn't just handy with a chainsaw and a cup of strong coffee. He was also the guy who helped install the old chain link fence that used to run around the backside of the lake. When I told him what was happening, he laughed for a solid 10 seconds. Then he said, "Son, it's time you gave that lake its teeth back." We got to work the next day. Alonzo brought his truck and a few fence panels he'd been storing just in case. We rebuilt the perimeter line along the back path, added a new gate with a sturdy lock, and installed a trail camera aimed directly at it. On the front side, I placed bright orange stakes, boundary markers with laminated legal notices stapled to each one. Every inch of that property line now screamed, "This is not your playground." But I wasn't done yet. I gathered everything. The deed, the county's denial of the HOA's claim, the letter I sent, the footage of trespassers, even photos of the dead fish left on my dock. I compiled it into a neat folder, drove to the town hall, and handed it straight to the county clerk along with a formal complaint. One that outlined Michelle's actions as not just civil overreach, but criminal harassment. And then one more move, the one I knew would sting the most. I filed a petition to revoke the HOA's temporary community use permit on the basis of fraudulent representation and repeated trespass. Because here's the thing, you can bully neighbors, you can spread gossip, but once you lie to the county, now you've got a real problem. The fishing tournament was set for Saturday. Despite everything, the letters, the warnings, even the sheriff's visit, the HOA had doubled down. Word around town was Michelle had told people the permit dispute was just a technicality, and that the event was still on pending resolution. Translation: show up anyway. Saturday morning, I woke up early, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and sat out on my porch, waiting. The lake was quiet. Still, almost like it knew what was coming. Then, around 10, the parade began. Cars lined the road, kids with poles, coolers in tow. A couple of guys with those folding canopy tents you see at tailgates. I counted at least 30 people heading straight for my dock, like it was theirs, but they didn't get far. The sheriff was already parked in my driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on, watching it all unfold. Behind him stood 2 county officials holding clipboards, one from code enforcement, the other from Parks and Rec. They weren't here for small talk. Michelle showed up last. Late. Loud, wearing a pastel sun hat like she was hosting a garden party, not leading a full-blown mutiny. She marched down the hill toward the dock, only to be intercepted. The sheriff stepped in front of her. "You're done, Michelle. Event's canceled. You've been served a cease and desist, and your permit's officially void. You set foot past that stake line again, and you're looking at criminal trespass." She laughed at first. "Hi, tight, nervous. Are you serious? This is ridiculous. He's been hoarding the lake for years. The community doesn't own it. The county rep cut in. And you knew that. You falsified access claims on a permit form. We pulled the old proposal from 2009. Your name was on that, too. Denied then. Still denied now. Michelle's face drained of color. Some of the crowd started murmuring. I could see confusion ripple through them. People realizing they'd been lied to, used. Michelle turned toward me like she was going to make some kind of last stand, but all she managed was, "You really did all this over a boat?" "No," I said. "I did all this because you thought you were above the rules." She didn't reply, and for the first time since this all began, she backed off. The crowd dispersed faster than they'd arrived. Some of them looked embarrassed. A few nodded at me on the way out. Quiet gestures of apology they didn't know how to say out loud. Others just walked off, heads down, pretending none of it ever happened. Typical. But Michelle? She didn't just leave, she vanished. No dramatic exit. No final word. Just turned, marched back to her car, and peeled out like the wheels could erase what just happened. By Monday, the fallout had started to spread. Word got around about the revoked permit, about the falsified documents, about the complaint filed with the county that included Michelle's name, date stamped, and notarized. Nobody needed the details. The fact that officials showed up at all said everything. An emergency HOA meeting was called, this time without Michelle. She'd stepped back from her duties, they said in a mass email, citing health reasons. But nobody bought that, not after what happened. I didn't go to that meeting. Didn't need to. But a neighbor, Curtis, the guy 2 doors down with the crooked basketball hoop, stopped by the next day. He stood at the edge of my porch for a second like he didn't know how to start. Then he said, "I just wanted to say we got it wrong. About you. About the lake. Michelle, she had everyone convinced you were trying to wall off the whole neighborhood. But you were just protecting what's yours." I nodded. It's not just about owning something. It's about not letting people walk all over you. He looked out toward the water, then back at me. "Well, if you ever want company out there, I've got a line that never catches anything in a 6-pack that probably goes too fast." I cracked a smile. Maybe one day. After he left, I walked down to the dock. The signs were still up, the cameras still rolling, but something in the air felt different, lighter. The pressure was gone. The fight was over. But the lesson? That stuck. A few weeks passed. No more flyers in the mailbox. No more strangers wandering across the shoreline like they owned it. The HOA meetings kept happening, but the tone shifted. Quieter, more cautious. Michelle officially resigned for personal reasons, and someone new stepped in. A guy named Terrence who introduced himself with a handshake and the words, "We've got no interest in the lake. We're here to rebuild trust." I told him that was a good start. The sign stayed up, not out of spite, but clarity. I wasn't trying to shut people out. I just wasn't going to be bulldozed. Not again. And the lake? She healed too. No beer cans, no cigarette butts in the reeds. The water ran clear, undisturbed, the way it was meant to. One Saturday morning, I took the boat out. First time in a long while. The sun had barely crested the trees, mist rolling low across the water like the world was still stretching its legs. I cut the motor halfway out and let the silence wrap around me. No meetings, no arguments, no HOA rules pretending to own what they didn't understand. Just me, the lake, and the legacy my dad left behind. I thought about everything it took to get here. The letters, the lies, the crowd that showed up on my dock like it was a community playground. And how close I came to just giving up, to letting it go because it felt easier than standing my ground. But I'm glad I didn't, because some things are not just worth fighting for. They're what remind you who you are. So if you've ever been the underdog in your own story, if you've ever had to fight for what's already yours, you're not alone. And if you're watching this from a place where the rules don't always feel fair, just remember, sometimes the quiet ones win loudest.